Hi, I'm here with David Treleaven at the Wisdom 2.0 conference, and he has done a book on trauma sensitive mindfulness and how, when we get back to our trauma through meditation and mindfulness, how when we help ourselves, we help others. And I'm happy to have him today. If you want to talk a little bit about yourself first, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Toronto. I'm gonna have a moment. Where do you want me to? Do you want me to talk to you or talk to the camera too?
It doesn't matter.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So from Toronto, been living in the U.S. for a while, and my main work is around where does mindfulness meditation help people who are struggling with trauma or struggling with an overwhelming negative experience, and where could it possibly hinder them? And so in my research, it's finding that some people really benefit from doing mindfulness meditation. Actually, most people will. And then there'll be this small number of people that will actually run into trouble. Mm-hmm. And so how can we, as people who are offering mindfulness instruction, how do we do that well? And what are the best practices that we can apply in order to make sure that no one's basically falling through the cracks?
Yeah, so a lot of times we don't talk about this in the workplace, and those of us that are running businesses and dealing with employee engagement, but a lot of sometimes the underlying cause of employees kind of going off the rails can be their trauma that is their inner work to do. Do you have any suggestions for companies that, may not realize that it's kind of like, the Band-Aid, rip the Band-Aid off, what's actually under there that's creating more of the issue?
I think that's the main thing I'd say to people who are implementing mindfulness programs in business is at a base level, don't assume that it's going to work for everyone all the time. Mm-hmm. I mean, mindfulness has a really great reputation, and for really good reason around research. And there's emerging research that says, hey, there's going to be 5-10% of people who might end up having difficult experiences. So I think that's just an entry level point is just have expectations, try to temper your expectations and watch out for anyone who's running into trouble, doesn't come back to the groups, because we don't want to lose them and have that, the cost of that can be high.
Right, and I think it's such an important point that those people that might drop out could experience the least amount of engagement in the company because they don't want to handle what's ever going on for them. So, it's a way of self-identification, but what kind of tips, so if those people tapped out of a mindfulness program that you put in the business, what kind of suggestions would you have to help them in their journey?
So the most practical thing that business owners can do when they're implementing these programs is actually to have some sort of check and balance around tracking people, and especially if they leave. So I've worked with business owners who said, how can I basically monitor that people are doing okay if they choose to opt out of the program? Mm-hmm. And as long as there's some basic protocol like a follow-up email, or at least we're tracking attendance, because basically people assume, if they left, maybe they just didn't like it, but it could be that something came up that was difficult for them, and it's helpful to have just a one-to-one conversation. So a quick story is I was working with a business, someone who had lost their mother, it was kind of a traumatic loss for them. They did the meditation, it just felt like too much for them.
Right.
And no one checked in with her about why she didn't come back. They just assumed, I guess she didn't like the meditation. But she was actually really drowning in some hard feelings. Mm-hmm. And she said, if I had a one-to-one conversation, if someone had emailed me or my manager had checked in, it would have felt so much better for me personally and in the company. Yeah. So it's like, just be tracking people, and I'd say that's the main instruction.
I think it's such a good thing to talk about, because you might put this program in place and someone might rate it down for reasons that you don't even realize why, when you put the survey out to the employees, and then you're not going one level deeper of what's working, what's not working, where can we put some coaches in and possibly help people in the way that work for them more privately.
Absolutely. I was doing some work, I was working with a couple different companies who there was a lot of pressure on the person bringing in the meditation program about the different basically the feedback that they were getting, and they had scores that they had to meet.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we found bumped the scores up is if there was actually some tracking that was happening. Pre-post survey, we knew we were going to have a conversation with you at the beginning and end. Right. That actually really helped with engagement, and actually bumped the scores up, which is really important for a bottom line.
Yeah, and it's important for organizations that if you're the team trying to push it in the organization, those metrics do matter. And so how can you help, improve it?
Totally.
So just switching gears, because, business owners, C-level executives, someone might be coming to them saying this is something our business could really use. I've read stuff that this really helps the company overall, from a profitability, level, employee engagement. However, they might just, have the idea of like, okay, do whatever you want. With a lot of the research, if the C-levels, if the owners are not practicing themselves, you're not leading by example. So what would be some suggestions as far as from an owner leadership perspective of how you get involved with this?
Yeah, when I talk to C-level folks, my recommendation is at least to try the program before they actually offer it to employees, because if they don't know it, if they haven't practiced it, it doesn't bring credibility inside the company, but also we want them to know the terrain that they're asking people into. So it's kind of an expected answer, but at least have your own practice and experience with it before you're just kind of jumping in and offering it to your whole company.
Yeah. Have you seen anything with the leadership teams that you've worked with where it's kind of thwarted the program or it's been a struggle for them?
I think the one time I saw it was when there was an executive team meeting, they had implemented mindfulness meditation practices in, and then it was clear that the person who was the CEO actually hadn't been doing any of the practices. And someone said, well, what do you think of this practice and how should we do this? And you could tell that the person didn't have the ground to answer the question. So it's more that it broke trust inside the company.
Yeah.
And so again, I think it's like if you're going to actually bring mindfulness programs in, know why it would benefit people and have personal examples that you can give about why this is useful and helpful.
And even what you struggled with.
Exactly.
Like when you actually can break down as a leader and say, look, this was hard for me too.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing this result. I think it's important. So anything else you want to offer up as far as ideas or information for people about this topic?
The one other thing I want to say is just even though I'm doing work and research around meditation, mindfulness, and trauma, that I want people to know in no way am I saying that something bad's going to happen or that any kind of fear-mongering about, oh, meditation's bad. That's not, I want to be clear because some people can think I'm going down that road. It's more to say it's an amazing practice, especially inside of companies. Let's just actually have a wide view of the range of experiences that can happen, and that we're all more powerful when we do that. So it's not a bad practice, and we want to be cautious.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.